and Markets here at the University of Pittsburgh. It is a huge honor and pleasure to be with you today, but I just have to say what a huge honor it is to have two guests with us to talk about events that are unfolding in Ukraine, from Ukraine. Just really delighted to have Nataliia Shapoval, who is the chairman of the Kyiv School of Economics Institute. She's the vice president for policy research. She's a member of the advisory board of the Center of Excellence in Procurement and many other titles, a real policy expert on procurement, governance reform, so many other things in Ukraine. She's with us live in Kyiv. And Tymofiy Mylovanov, who is the president of the Kyiv School of Economics. He's also an associate professor of economics here at the University of Pittsburgh, former deputy chairman of the National Bank of Ukraine, and former Minister of Economic Development, Trade, and Agriculture of Ukraine. I should also say Tymofiy was my former microeconomics teacher in graduate school, so he is responsible for the product that you see in front of you. Really honored to have both of you with us. I know it's been a very long night in Kyiv. We're hearing all the reports about fighting approaching the center of the city. Can you just tell us, how was your night? What's going on?
Maybe, I don't know, I can start or,
sure.
But
yeah, go ahead.
So, I think this night we spent not in Kyiv, but in suburbs, sometime somewhere not far from Kyiv, but it is relatively safe. The Kyiv currently is being attacked from the north mostly, and from surprisingly the east, because we were expecting it would come from Russia, or well, actually we were not expecting the Kyiv would be attacked. At least we hoped it wouldn't be true. But to the northwest of Kyiv, there is an air base where actually Antonov, this famous Ukrainian plane Antonov is located, and the plant is located. So that air base was attacked by 34 helicopters from Russia, from Belarus. And that's, I think, one point which is missing from conversation. Russia is attacking, but the troops are also coming from Belarus. So, Belarus as the country authorized that and is a part of an invasion too. Or maybe it's not a sovereign country anymore. So that needs to be spelled out, and I think the media misses it. But anyway, so there was paratroopers and special ops and all kinds of Marines, and you name it, Russian Marines moved in that airfield. Basically, air brigade was, and then a Ukrainian Air Force engaged, and then our security forces, also special ops, engaged. And I think it was a fighting yesterday, on and off. We had an escape plan. We all were ready to different extent, but we kind of had a get to safety protocol. And once the first shelling and bombing started in Kyiv yesterday morning, we woke up at 5:30 or 6 a.m. and tried to get to safety. The problem was that it is my sister's house, and it is close to that air base. So we spent hours trying to get to safety. Once we got there were jets or flying overhead, and tank columns moving towards this air base, trying to kill and disperse Russian paratroopers. And so we had to relocate again. So we're a little bit, south now from Kyiv, but it is safe. But the first night was unexpected. The first day was really tough. And I think people who have stayed in Kyiv, and I talked to some of them, they didn't really have a night of sleep. Their apartments were closed. I don't have any friends whose apartments or houses were hit, but there is a lot of shelling and cruise and ballistic missiles now hitting civilian areas and buildings. I think Nataliia can say more. There are about 6 buildings right now on fires, 6 skyscrapers or something like that in Kyiv.
So according to the last report in the news, there are at least 6 to 8 areas in Kyiv where there is some either fighting or strikes and it concerns civilian population. So Kyiv is not a military infrastructure in this regard. So I woke up today because my team, I have a team of approximately right now 30 people who are with whom we very closely coordinate, and they started writing that across the street, like they have the airstrikes, and they are going to the shelter and trying to find a way to get out of Kyiv. So it was really, I felt like a panic and try to manage something. This area that was struck in the morning, it's very close to the place where I lived for 20 years. So it's like across the street of us. Our team is partly in Kyiv. Some joined territorial brigades that protect the city. Some joined military forces, and some, like myself, we are absolutely useless for all kind of medical and military stuff. And that's why we are trying to do some analytics from the metro stations, from shelters, from homes around Kyiv and elsewhere, and hope to be like useful in this way for our government and for the president and parliament. I have to say that kind of my work is that I usually criticize or evaluate what the government is doing, but right now I kind of like pray for them, because there are really intelligence being leaked that they are personally will be attacked. And this is the same kind of intelligence that was predicting that the war will start during this period. So it's really, it's really helpful that you are giving us a chance to use our like analytical weapons and try to spread the word about what's really going on and how bad it is for humanity.
So, just a question, for many from the audience, I think we're waking up here in the United States, trying to understand what's going on. Last night, or during the night here, Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, made a statement that sort of confirmed what I think a lot of us knew, was that the real intention here is regime change in Ukraine. What do you think the end game here is for Putin and for Russia? Are they trying to just change the regime? Are they trying to divide the country? Where do you think this is all headed? Or do you think they know? Nataliia.
Maybe let's have the same order all the time.
Okay, sure.
And then myself.
Yes.
It will be easy.
Yeah, it's really hard for me to say. And, I think Nataliia actually has better insights, and what we had discussions today. And I thought maybe, there'll be, simply technically at this point, clearly that there is an invasion. It's full-blown invasion. It's not just in the east of Ukraine. It's coming from the north, from Belarus. It's coming from the south, all angles. It's about 6,000 kilometers, maybe 4,000 miles of borders that you have to protect. So, and there are about between 90 and 110 tactical groups, battalion groups that Russia and Belarus amassed together. So, wherever they hit, if they, if they meet resistance, then they can, pull back and attack from a different angle. And that's, I think, what happened when they sent these paratroopers and couldn't control the military base in the north of Kyiv. Now they moved tanks from Belarus from new directions, and these tanks are maybe, halfway made it halfway to Kyiv. What's the end game? It's, of course, one is that people are thinking maybe Ukraine will be split. The other one is, maybe to force negotiations with Zelensky about the neutral status or demilitarization or some other things. And Ukrainians are going to resist and going to continue to resist. Today, just in Kyiv, tens of thousands of people, got weapons, Kalashnikovs, and others. So it's unclear to me how it would be possible to really maintain or occupy Kyiv even alone. So I don't, most people say it's not feasible, and I agree with that. So there must be some, then it's not probably occupation. I thought there may be some kind of new status quo and negotiations would be on the table, depending on how Ukrainian and Russian militaries perform. But then we had an discussion or debate with Nataliia about that it would not satisfy Putin. And I think at this point, I probably, I'll transfer the word to Nataliia, because Nataliia made quite compelling arguments about what Putin is looking for, and that there is no reason for him to look for any kind of settlement or negotiation or ceasefire agreement or nothing, because he already paid the cost to start the invasion. It's very discreet. It's very 0-1. So he invaded the country. Okay, he started a war in Europe. Okay, now he should squeeze as much as possible out of this. So Nataliia, maybe you share your arguments, because I found them quite compelling today.
Yeah, thanks. In fact, it's pretty difficult to look into this end game question from the economist perspective. So it has nothing to do, with some objective gain. So neither for himself personally nor for Russia as a country. And my argument to Tymofiy was that this is a kind of person and kind of behavior that was demonstrated by Stalin and by Hitler, by Nazi. So there is no rationality and no specific project what we want to get from that. And why I'm making this argument is because what Lavrov was saying, and was I think it was reiterated several times, about change of the regime and creating neutral zone. So that's so they have very specific mantra. Okay, so I have a new habit of reading Twitter of Russian president office from time to time, and they have very clear, repetitive mantra that we want NATO to get back to the borders of the Tsar, and then we want Minsk agreement implemented, and this specifically means recognition of the this state that they occupied, and they want guarantees for their security against NATO, and they want that the division of powers do not change as compared to how it was 30 years ago. So, and this is already kind of, it is, so there is already neutrality in Ukraine. Ukraine is not in NATO. Ukraine is, so it's kind of, there is no logic in starting a war to gain something that is already there. And kind of, that's why I have a very pessimistic prediction about what's gonna happen. And I think that we will see the symptoms of what was going on in these previous wars, with people who would be called some nationalists or whatever title, and part of them will be in jail and part of them will be killed. In fact, Putin has been doing it in respect to his own country and citizens, but we just didn't care that much about it. But I think we will see symptoms like that, and I don't see that he will negotiate. So that's not kind of disease in which people negotiate.
Nataliia, I just wanted to clarify what Nataliia means is that the civil society, journalists, opinion leaders, people who are, the leaders of the military, people who basically lead the society, similarly to what we have seen in Russia and in Belarus, they will be persecuted. I think that's the end game. Because the NATO neutrality is there. Ukraine poses no real military, political, or even economic threat to Russia. The only threat it poses is that it has a very vibrant democratic society. Now, it's a bit of a theory if you start talking about that Russia, it's an autocracy or dictatorship trying to take over a democracy. But in practice, what Putin has been doing with respect to his opposition, from poisoning to imprisoning people and, tolerating or even ordering murders of the prominent opposition figures. We have seen that in Russia. We have seen people poisoned in London. We have seen people killed downtown in Moscow, and we have seen people arrested and persecuted and kept in awful conditions, in torturous conditions for years. So the similar tactics have been done in Belarus, and actually similar tactics have been recommended and attempted to implement in 2014 in Ukraine before the, during the Maidan. Oppression and suppression and persecution of anyone who dissents. And I think, I don't know what the reasons for that is, but that's the playbook. That's what we have seen in every region. That's what's happening with Crimean Tatars in Crimea. That's what's happening in Donetsk and Lugansk, in the territories not controlled by Ukraine, with anyone who has a sensible opposition. So I think he's gonna crush it. That doesn't mean that it's his end goal, but once he is in Ukraine, and if he succeeds in kind of getting control of Ukraine, and that's not given at all yet. It is not given. Because the fights is, they thought they would roll over over one day. It's not even close to be over.
So that's my next question for you, is how long do you think that this government can endure both politically, militarily, and then also the economic question? We can deal with the economic question a bit later, but I think all of us are watching. It's hard for any of us to say, but do you think that there's a lot of speculation. Last night, I was reading 1 hour Russian tanks will be in downtown Kyiv. What is your sense about how long the government can endure, given this pressure?
Right. Let's go in the same order, and then
yes.
I'll try again. Then we'll send it to Nataliia. So I think first, Anne Applebaum in her column in the Atlantic recently in the Atlantic said, Putin has forgotten nothing and has learned nothing. Every time Putin does something like that, it mobilizes Ukrainians. We have seen that in numbers. It's not just emotion. We have seen that in trends in sociology and identification and all kinds of cultural values exhibited by people. We have seen more connections and trust across the regions. Any metrics you take, there is heterogeneity, but they have the same trend. Russia puts pressure on Ukraine. There's more identity and there's more sovereignty. So in that sense, I think if Ukraine succeeds and withstands this fight, then Zelensky is very likely to secure his second term right now, essentially, because it's rally around the flag, and he's even people who were in severe opposition to him are now supporting him because he has shown tremendous resolve and ability to perform under pressure and lead under pressure. We have not had a president like that. So this is, in fact, miraculous that he is standing up and rising up to the challenge. So I'm very proud of the president we have today. You can even compare.
Even Poroshenko came out, yeah.
Yeah, even Poroshenko. So you can compare it with other countries which came under pressure from Russia, and how the presidents behave, both in Ukraine and others. Let's say, Georgia, Belarus, Moldova. All these historic incidents. By the way, this is a pattern of behavior. It's not an isolated. That's why I named. You have Kazakhstan, you have Moldova, Transnistria, you have Nagorno-Karabakh. You have Georgia annexation, you have Crimea, now you have second episode, you have Belarus. So, it's a pattern. It's a real pattern over the last 20 years or so. Now, so politically, I think that is okay. So of course, they will kind of resist, and in fact, I think their popularity will grow of the government. On the military side, that's the question of actually working it out in the field. Unfortunately, it came to that. And on the economic, I think Nataliia actually and her team are working on the immediate financial and economic support. And, we have bottlenecks in some of the supply chains, especially in energy. What is, like, let's say in diesel fuel, which is needed for tanks, and so on and so forth. And that's where we need some support. But I think Nataliia can speak more about that.
Yeah, go ahead, Nataliia.
Yeah, thanks. I echo what Timo said about endurance of the government. So far, really, it looks like Russian soldiers are, in many cases, are not really interested in doing what they are doing in Ukraine, and it ends badly in many cases. The government of Ukraine, the president, Verkhovna Rada, the parliament, they are really working non-stop from their offices in the center of the Kyiv, despite all this intelligence that they are the target. So, and Ukrainians are very mobilized. So I looked into the national police statistic today, and they say that criminal rates are 0. So even people who are normally criminals, they are protecting and fighting against what's going on in Ukraine. And the spirit is really high. Everyone is mobilized and helping in every way they can, staying from shelters, etc. So my prediction that really Ukraine will endure, and there is no such kind of motivation among Russian soldiers or whatever they call them. Then in terms of economics, it's really helpful that governments send money to the national reserves of the central bank, because panic will affect naturally behavior of people and businesses, and they would need to stabilize what's going on. And there is budgetary support from other governments, so that's important. But as Tymofiy mentioned, in some supplies, Ukraine traditionally traded and imported them from Russia and Belarus. And buying these products are right now not a question of money, but a question of transportation infrastructure. For example, a lot of imports of oil products comes from the seaports right now, and from certain parts, connected to the Belarus. And in both of these routes, right now there are big risks for the companies that are trying to transport their deliveries to Ukraine. So we had news reports today and yesterday about several, like Panama, Moldova, and Turkish ships with supplies that were attacked. So there is a clear signaling and attempts of Russia to restrict access to critical military supplies. In this regard, money might not really help. I cannot say that Ukraine. So the government and the military, they have their own secret reserves of things that that others don't have access to. But what we see from the market, really, it's supply of fuels is something that really critical right now, and that's, I think, one of the key areas where international partners and countries and just usual, businesses and people can try to help Ukrainians to endure in what's going on right now.
We're going to open things up to Q&A in a second, but another question that we've just gotten from the audience sort of along these lines is, do you suspect that President Zelensky will stay in Kyiv? He's promised to stay in the country. Do you think he'll move to Lviv? Do you think he'll go elsewhere? Is he planning on staying in Kyiv?
Yeah, it's hard to say, but he behaves differently from other presidents in the history of Ukraine. Yesterday when there was, he said he was targeted, and the intelligence shows that there are special op teams operating in Kyiv already, and some of them were eliminated today. 20, 30 minutes drive and maybe 2 hours walk from the government headquarters. That, in his response to that, he admitted that. He said, my family is in secure location. I'm not going to disclose where it is. I am in the government quarter. And he declared that he has headquarters for military operations where that he will be leading. So he's kind of making the point that I'm not leaving. I cannot, this is our land. This is our capital. We're defending Kyiv. And I think, in fact, there's some symbolism in it. It would be, part of the game from Russia is sort of the narrative is that Ukrainian people, but not only Ukrainian people, Russian, Belarusian, all people that they're dealing with don't have any agency, it's always protests in Kazakhstan, it's always someone manufactured it. In Ukraine, it's always someone manufactured. It's never people, it's never about people. People don't have the agency to decide their fate and the fate of their government. That's not the case. Zelensky is showing that, it's the people of Ukraine who decide the future, and he as the president is going to stay in future. We have been speculating and debating with Nataliia today what's plan B, and I think some of the ideas Nataliia said that plan B is that he has, in case he gets killed, there is another government on standby, and that might be in exile if something like that happens. But he's clearly making a point that he's not moving.
So a question for the both of you, before we get to the sanctions, and there are a lot of questions from the audience about sanctions, what more can the international community do to support Ukraine? What kind of assistance is necessary? Before we get to the penalties, I want to just talk about what can be done to support Ukraine right now.
Nataliia, do you want to go first on this?
Okay. So I think first thing that even ordinary people from other countries can be doing, and governments as well, is recognizing what's really happening and how huge the impact is on civilian people in Ukraine, and recognizing that governments should act according to the situation, according to how serious it is. And create this, popular support of their governments making tough decisions. I frankly think that Putin is making crimes against Ukrainians, like individually and as a country, and all this international infrastructure of security, all these agencies, courts, etc. I think they should start recognizing that that's a crime and it should be punished accordingly. I also think that it's really, I cannot imagine how all these awesome leaders of the world can allow Putin to kill our president in his office in the center of the city. How we can live as in all our countries that after this is possible. And I think in this regard, it's really critical, given this intelligence that these foreign governments are leaking, to protect Ukrainian government and Ukrainian people, because it's totally visible and evident that civilians are attacked. So I think that military support, okay, if they cannot do it, people give equipment. I think it's really critical to provide this military support. And then supplies and monitoring, all these drones that could record and show what's really going on, and make Russian people aware of what's really going on. Because Russian people, they live in their own bubble. They don't have proper news. They don't have facts except for what Putin is saying to them. And sanctions, I don't think that sanctions economically have any sense to anyone. That's waste of resources for anyone. No one wins. But there is no other channel to communicate to Russian people at all levels that it's like a big deal. And guys, pay attention to this. What are you allowing your government to make? Thanks.
So you're saying more sanctions should be necessary. We'll follow up on this in a second. Timofey, do you want to add to this?
No, you know, I think so. I think what Nataliia is saying is that sanctions should be taken seriously. I think Nataliia started with this and finishing it. You know, the government should recognize that this is not, you know, you cannot brush it away. We were talking about it earlier that it is a pattern for the last 20 years. It's not going to stop. There is a domino effect, or maybe a design of domino. So after Ukraine, the next countries will be, you name it, you know what, Poland, the Baltic countries, you know, and Putin only gets, or his regime only gets emboldened. You know, it was much easier to stop them in, you know, in 2008 after Georgia invasion. But, you know, I was in Ukraine in 2008, and even we didn't care, you know, that much. It was, you know, Georgians, you know, the reaction of the international community and of Ukraine too was, you know, limited. There were some sanctions, but it was not serious. And I think what Putin is doing, he is testing, he is calling the bluffs, and he is saying, you know, where is that red line? I don't think there is any red line. And every time, you know, when there is a need to make a tough decision, this tough decision is not made, and then 5 years later we have another escalation. People are wondering how come we arrive at this situation. At the same time, I think sanctions, you know, I was asked earlier by a reporter on TV during an interview saying, do you think sanctions will work? Will work for what? Stop invasion in Ukraine? Obviously not. You know, reverse what has been done? Obviously not. Bring Putin to negotiate on whose terms? On European terms or Ukrainian terms? Obviously not. So what's the purpose of sanctions? Let's not have a mismatch. You know, truly sanctions are, let's do something that we feel, you know, that we are doing something. Probably will have a longer term impact on Russia. But, you know, if it were a deterrent strategy, then the history of the last 10 years or 15 years shows clearly that the sanction approach doesn't work. So it should be a different approach. Now, if it is about just being popular, you know, kind of, we've done something, we've done what we could. So let's then understand that it's a very different objectives to resolve the situation in Ukraine and protect humans. You know, we all are humans on this planet. So protecting humans, and, you know, we have to take it seriously and do something else. So in my view, sanctions are not working.
So then what should be done?
Okay, so strengthen the military, strengthen the economy, provide credit lines to the central bank to ensure confidence in the finance system. By the way, it was surprising how orderly everything is functioning. Grocery shops, telecom, Wi-Fi, cellular networks, banks.
Yeah, I was worried that we wouldn't find you today.
Yeah, so that tells you something, you know, and we just went to a grocery, to a food store and bought, what did we buy? We bought avocados and had an avocado salad. So, you know, it tells you that there are supplies in Ukraine. Now, but of course they are limited, and the limited means infrastructure. As Nataliia was saying, we need fuel, we need energy security right now, maybe food security just to prevent panic. And that means securing trade routes. And Russian military is clearly signaling by attacking ships in the east and disrupting routes in the north that the standard trade routes are not going to be feasible. So that means we have to open routes from Poland, from Slovakia, from Romania and Hungary. And the EU countries have a certain amount of strategic storage of this fuel, so they can share that. And they can diversify by replenishing it from other partners and other countries in the meantime. But we need that support. We probably used, you know, 10–15% of our energy supplies over the last 2–3 weeks because, you know, fighting is intense. You know, jets are not free and tanks are not free. They consume a lot of diesel.
So, you know, we have a question here about Russian misinformation. You've talked about that, the effect on the Russian public, but a question about how effective Russian misinformation and propaganda is inside of Ukraine. How have people, obviously, you know, throughout the post-Soviet space, you see a lot of this. You know, Russians using media. I know that a lot of the television stations were shut down a few months ago. How effective is Russian misinformation inside Ukraine? Or is it just being repelled by people? They understand because there's more of a market.
I'm gonna run with this. Like first, maybe I think at this point, kind of people have seen the missiles and they have landed across the country. So what kind of if you wake up at 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. and because your children are crying, or someone your relative is calling you and asking can we just go to the shelter? Your daughter is calling you. There's been reports like that. Probably I think disinformation is over. I think what we're seeing attempts at disinformation is to scare the public and say, Kyiv has fallen, Mariupol has fallen, Kharkiv has fallen, but nothing, no city has fallen yet. There are fights and they're serious everywhere, and there's territory in which the Ukrainian army retreated. That's absolutely true, and there are casualties on both sides. And equipment lost and people's lives lost, but no city has fallen yet, and hopefully it won't come to that, even though some cities are surrounded. So this is what's happening. It's quickly developing, and I think currently this disinformation campaign is really about the facts on the ground to create panic, and in that way destabilize the society from inside. In many ways, I think this campaign shows, the military campaign, that the disinformation and destabilization politically and informationally from inside the society has failed. So they have now resorted to actual force.
Nataliia.
I will make an example. So part of my family is from Russia. My mother is from Russia, and we have relatives there. And it happened that in specifically the house where my mom lives, there is only Russian TV. So something went wrong, and she was not interested, to have to do something with the TV providers, and she had a lot of Russian channels. And she had a perspective that, that's might set some perspective about like what Putin is doing, and that Russia is developing, and her relatives are feeling well. They have huge social benefits. And she wasn't aggressive in this, but she kind of was consuming this information. But then when she saw tanks and she saw what's going on her street, there was no question. And like the first bomb that was 2 days ago in the morning, there was no question among people. And even actually my Russian relatives, they will never, they're afraid. So Russians don't have like feeling that they might have any impact on what's going on. And Russia is really big, and this distant regions, they feel that there is nothing that they can do, but they also understand what's going on. We all have relatives there.
We all have relatives there, yeah. And speaking of Russia, do you think that there's been protests across Russia over the past 2 days? Do you think that this is affecting Putin's calculus? Have you been surprised by this? Do you think that this hints that you're not experts on Russian public opinion, but do you think that there may be far less support for Putin and for this operation than he may have thought?
We've been looking at some sociological data from Russia, from Levada Center and others, and people have consistently been showing that the largest fears or contingencies that they are worried about are economic crisis and stability of the government and COVID. Issues related to NATO or Ukraine or full-blown war and other things were really not in the top line. So, the sociology has not been shown that this is an issue either way, that people feel strongly in terms of support, or people fear that there will be a war, or they care in many ways. At least that's how I read the data that I have looked at. The fact that, now I can say, as a scientist, therefore, I don't quite know that, maybe there'll be a change now, because maybe people didn't really realize. But, as a human, as a person, as a citizen, I think I'm positively surprised that there are protests in Russia. In some sense, as I've been arguing, this is a pattern. This is not an isolated incident, this war, even though it is the most extreme of these elements of this pattern. And so I think it started some processes domestically. inside the politics elite, the political elites of Russia and among the population. That will take time to mature, but will unravel Russia, or at least will weaken in many ways. And I think the winner of all of this will be China. And so China stands to benefit from weakening both the Russian, the Russian government, the EU, and Ukraine too. So I think the real winner in terms of power is not power game, is not Putin, it's China.
I'm going to follow up on that in 1 second. Nataliia, do you have anything to add on this? I know you're hard at work looking at all that data, and you have been for years. And if you're not familiar with the work at the Policy Institute of Kyiv, at the Kyiv School of Economics, and the incredible work that Nataliia has done on procurement reform, she is a data cruncher, a number cruncher, and has really just spearheaded so many important reforms in many different areas. So I'll let you speak.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. For this question, it's really hard to add because not only because there is not that much sociological research, but also because it's usually sanitized in Russia. So I'm surprised as well that there are protests. And we see immediate effects on these people. They suffer, they get the toughest punishment. And I really hope that there are much more people like that. And I agree that it's important, and it's probably happening that moods and understanding of what's going on in Russia will be changing.
So I encourage our audience, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A and we'll get to them. And, following up on this question on China, we have a question from the audience about the role of China and what it means for how NATO, the EU, and the international community handles further actions from China. Tymofiy, you have a really interesting theory here about that, what's happening really is going to weaken Russia. Weakening Russia strengthens China. And, a lot of us have been watching this, looking at the very strong relations between Russia and China. Seems to be unbroken, but China's in a very, somewhat of a bind here as well. So tell us a little bit more about this theory about China that you've hinted at.
Yeah, so, what I've seen China does in the region is it enters in Belarus and tries to enter in Ukraine and in Russia with investments, soft kind of power, putting technology and putting strategic technology in that, or acquiring strategic technology. And systemic companies. For example, they've been acting in military technology in Ukraine, in food security, in logistics, in the areas where, which are fundamentally the strategic supply chains for everyone in the region. In other words, if you get into food security for the region, or if you get into military security for the region, and you hold or you own critical enterprises and have influence over them, then you have some influence over the supply chain overall. And I've seen them doing that in Belarus as well. And now the EU and the West, or more generally with North America, the EU, they've been worried about pushing away Russia to China. And Russia has exploited it to, get away with more things in Ukraine and elsewhere. And now, belatedly, the West starts to respond and achieving the very same result, which was inevitable in many ways. So this kind of strategy of hoping, the problem with the West strategy is myopic, it's not well thought through. But what's happening on the ground now, the West has to respond somehow, and it will respond more seriously than usually. That will economically and politically isolate, if temporarily, Russia, and Russia will come to rely more on China. For example, if we sanction, you have seen that already in the behavior of the central bank. They have diversified their assets a lot. Actually, Russia is prepared to be less vulnerable to assets. They have a huge central bank resource. They have huge national wealth fund, and they have been diversifying.
That insulates them from the sanctions. I mean, that makes it, yeah.
But furthermore, they've diversified the holdings away from dollar for quite a bit now. So if you look at the data, they've been moving into yuan and they've been moving into other currency, they've been ready. But now, as they have been insulated and isolated from the Western financial networks, or being hit a little bit by that, they will come to rely more on China for the very same reason. And now China has more leverage. And there's only so many battles you can have, If you fight with everyone, you can't afford to fight with someone else. That means the bargaining power of China versus Russia has increased.
Nataliia, do you want to add to this?
Yeah, I think that will be a consequence. The way question is formulated, that China will get stronger. I cannot comment whether there is some kind of, preset up to make that happen, but that will be consequence for sure.
We have a lot of questions about the EU and NATO here. There seems to be quite a number of divisions within the EU about sanctions, about the way to respond. NATO has really stayed out of this, obviously. What is your sense about going forward, that the role of Germany in all of this? I imagine there's a great deal of disappointment in Kyiv, looking at how so many other countries, Italy is responding. Their whole Kyiv School of Economics sent out a series of, I posted on Twitter, I think a number of us shared it yesterday, a list of demands, requests, policies that could be implemented. I think there was 11 of them. And of course, the restrictions on SWIFT banking was one of them. And we saw yesterday the Italians, the Germans and others weren't ready to go forward with this. Do you have any thoughts about support from other EU countries? Are you disappointed? Where do you think this is going? Or is the specter of violence, do you think, going to change their reaction?
My view, it's unlikely it's going to change. Germany has not been investing in resource in strategic diversification and the decrease in leverage, economic leverage and political leverage of Russia. In fact, it has been doing things which makes it more dependent. For example, Ukraine today is better diversified in terms of energy and less reliant on Russia than Germany. We don't rely on gas, and we have our gas consumption is at all-time low. Now, that means we have made some choices. We actually increased our nuclear power plants production, and that might be not ideal, but that provides strategic security. And we also diversified our nuclear energy, nuclear fuel supplies away from Russia, because in 2013 it was 100% supply from Russia. Now we get it from other sources and are diversified. So we have been working on this. Other countries could have done that too. In some sense, they actually have done reverse. Could be very different opinions about whether it was justified or not, but the data shows that it would be very costly and very difficult for the EU to shut down trade in energy with Russia. So it means Russia has leverage. At the same time, Russia, is also reliant on the EU. And it would be difficult for Russia to diversify its supplies. It cannot export to many other countries. It's just for the same logistical problems. So here, what the EU could have done is to have a better coordination on its policies, and therefore it would have a better bargaining position against Russia, and that has not been done. So Russia has a strong bargaining power economically, and we have seen with Germany and with Italy recently that they are blocking actions that would probably benefit, at least strategically would benefit everyone, in my view. This is gonna end badly, I think, for the strategic position of the EU.
Nataliia, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I'm frustrated. It's not that we didn't see that before. There are many countries where people are suffering from wars and from lack of food and disasters, and nobody really helps them. So that's not something new in the world, but it's new in the fact that it's happening in Europe. There is nuclear power plant. If something already happening with that, it's occupied by Russians. And if something gonna move even worse,
I just want to, Nataliia, just to clarify. So
yeah.
Chernobyl Ukraine has lost control over Chernobyl.
Yeah.
And it's the site of nuclear disaster, and I think it's still partly operational. And the Ukrainian government is reporting that the rates of radiation have increased at the monitoring sites. So this is, I think, just a clarification.
Yeah, thanks. So in this regard, the situation is new. It's in the center of Europe. It will quickly affect other countries if the situation gets worse. We have nuclear plants all over the country. We have a lot of other types of energy and chemical infrastructure that will damage like really everyone. So that's really kind of course, maybe Europeans see it as low probability risks, but 2 days ago we also saw that war is a low probability risk, but such events do happen. And in this regard, it's new, and I'm frustrated that there is clear evidence of crimes against people of Ukraine, and clearly like criminal behavior, and there is no like response that is commensurate with what Putin is doing. Of course, we all understand why it's going on. We can justify that, yes, Europe is really dependent on energy, and Germany specifically benefits from the Nord Stream 2. And of course, there are even some risks from for the gas infrastructure, but it's kind of human lives that are at stake, and I don't know to what degree it makes sense to justify. At the end of the day, it's not, we not just cost and benefit type of beings. We are human, and maybe we should also value life of people to some extent, not only count everything in dollars.
So, speaking of that, we've gotten a lot of requests about how people can help. There's a lot of a desire to help people in Ukraine right now. Especially here in the United States, we're hearing a lot. And I imagine all over the world for those of us tuning in. I see people from all over the world here right now, and it's quite remarkable, the audience that we have. What would you recommend people do if they want to help?
Nataliia, you go ahead, maybe.
Okay, so yeah, first, thanks a lot that you're here and you're already taking this perspective, and you might dig deeper in what's really happening. First thing that you can do is share factual information and explain to your friends what's going on. Second, if you happen to live somewhere in Poland or in neighboring countries, you can really motivate your government or local businesses to make supplies to Ukraine of things that are critical for warfare. It's pretty easy to predict, actually, what's gonna be needed. And I think it's feasible for many individuals and businesses to help in that regard.
And Nataliia is talking not about weapons here. Nataliia is talking about blood, medicine, supplies, food, and oil, gas, things like that. Businesses can help by simply shipping it.
Yeah, and actually even all these donations of money, everything of that, increasing the spirit among Ukrainians that we get support from other normal people, and there are people that care. So we are grateful for that. So of course we have to say that the correct response to that is to stop these criminal actions, and that military support is needed. But at the same time, we're really grateful for everything that you are doing, and all the WhatsApp messages asking how the night went. That's really important. Thank you.
Of course. And, I just want to say that the work that you all do at the Kyiv School of Economics is truly inspirational to me as an educator. I think to many of us, I look at what you're doing, and it's a huge model for what's possible in education. It's innovative, it's cutting edge, you're nimble, you're agile, you've been able to respond to issues, you're creative. I mean, I look at higher education around the world, and I don't see anything quite like what you all have there in Ukraine. And, before we wrap things up, I'll give you the floor, but my final question to you, before giving you the floor, just to say what's on your mind is, how are things at KSE? How are your students? How are you carrying on during this time? It must be very hard for you, both as educators, leaders, to support your students. They must be going through a lot as well.
We have checkups regular. We had plans, actually. I think I've seen the question is, have people been surprised or something like that? We hoped it wouldn't come to that, but I kind of knew personally, so that's why I pushed my schedule and flew back earlier, several days before. Before the conflict, and we ran some trainings and drills, and we had protocols when even determined the contingencies of when those protocols would be triggered, because it's great to have protocols, but you know how it works. You wake up at 5:30 a.m. because everyone is calling and people are freaking out, and you're like, what just happened? Because at that point you're still disoriented. You probably were reading the news, you went to bed at 2 a.m., you slept for 3 hours, you wake up because something is happening. Or maybe nothing is happening. Maybe it's a gas explosion, in the next house next to you. Or maybe it's just a neighbor was moving furniture and, it fell on, a floor above you, so you don't quite know. Then you go on, on the social networks or something, and, it's all conflicting information. Someone is saying, no worries, nothing happened. Someone is saying there's live ammunition, fired at the airport. Someone is saying there's a ballistic missile, what's happening. So at that point, we had a protocol actually, and it's really important because you really need eyewitness accounts to figure out how serious threat is. Our protocol is within an hour of an event like that, we called top management meeting at the Kyiv School of Economics, and we reported everyone whatever we knew. And some people were in the areas which were hit. So immediately we knew it was serious, that there were missiles or there's something. There were explosions because people live all over the place. So we shared information and we verified that this information, that is serious. So then we put get to safety protocol in place. Which means every head of the department calls subordinates or heads of subordinate departments. They call everyone, and everyone has their individual plan what they should do. And then we started implementing them. And also we shut down the university facilities. We sent emails, canceled events and classes, did the things like that. That really helped because a lot of people who couldn't get to shelter within the first 3-5 hours. The issue is not that Russians were attacking the civil population the first day. In some sense, what they did, they attacked and I think it's very cynical and very smart at the same time. So they attacked the military installations, and that gives time for people to leave. And then who wants to fight stays or comes back. And so after that moment, they start targeting civilian population because that's the population which is going to resist. Those who have not left are going to resist. So they start targeting civilian population too in a day or two. But the real bottleneck is logistics, is roads out of the city or out of danger roads, out of danger zone. So that's where you get stuck. I have a friend, a classmate with, 3 months baby. He spent 5 hours in the car and kind of gave up on it and went back to his apartment. Now he's spending nights, in his building in the parking, and they can't get out because everything is now block post, military activities and stuff. So you have to move real quick. Now we canceled the classes. Everyone has to get to safety. We'll reassess the situation on Sunday. If it comes to any normal, which we don't think anymore, but at that point we thought we would restore classes online, hold it for a while, and then we'll move back offline. Now, at this point, we're preparing for all kinds of extended contingencies, including relocation of the Kyiv School of Economics. But at the same time, our analysts and about half of the team is working online, trying to support the government in all possible ways with analysis and such. And we do twice-a-day checkups with everyone. It's also done in the same way. Heads of the departments with the subordinate departments, and they with everyone. So it's done individually.
Great. Nataliia, do you want to add to this?
No, I think my short comment is that indeed KC, at least analytical team, is very much involved right now in trying to spread the word, and some are even joining the military forces of different kinds. So my friend, he went to Tymofiy Voyenkomat. How was it?
Yeah, it's
the draft committee. Yeah,
it's conscription center or something.
Conscription center, yeah.
Yeah, and he was so he has no physical skills. I never noticed. He was just putting something on computer all the time for last 10 years when we know each other. But then he joined these forces, and he was appointed to protect this center to which volunteers are coming. And 10 minutes. And today, so he was appointed, and 10 minutes from this place, there were airstrikes and everything. So that's, but the spirit is high everywhere, and we think that we will win, actually.
Yeah, it's
that's I think how we all feel that we're gonna win.
We hope that things remain peaceful. I was just talking to one of your colleagues at KSE, who I'm doing some research with, and he said that he has been called up. There's universal conscription now for men 18 to 60, and so he says we probably might not be able to do that project we thought about. I'll be joining. He's been conscripted, so just like every other man of that age. So it's really quite amazing just to see what's happened in such a short period of time, and how this is affecting everybody. And just really grateful for the time that you've taken to spend with us. And before we go, I just want to give the floor to the both of you. When this morning, I wasn't sure whether we'd be able to hold this. I watched the news. I mean, I've been up, I think we've all been watching this so carefully and thinking about what's been happening, and so worried about the both of you, worried about our friends in Kyiv, worried about so many of our friends in Ukraine. I wasn't sure that we'd be able to have this event today because just the chaos that is the consequence of war. And both of you were really adamant that we have this, that we do this, that we carry on, that we keep going, and that you wanted to have a voice. And, I hope this has provided that for you, but I just wanted to give you a few minutes just to share individually your thoughts, anything that we haven't asked you, anything that you want to say to the world right now.
Nataliia, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that this situation we are going through, it's for all the partners and for all citizens in the partner countries and in Ukraine, it's like an exam, like what we value and in what kind of world and with what kind of behavior we want to live.
Thank you.
I think we have to pass this exam because it will be very hard for everyone to live in the world where we left our country, our homes as IDPs or something, in the world where presidents and governments can be killed, and it will happen on Twitter with tweets of presidents that we are against it and nothing is done.
Yeah, so we need more action, not just words and condemnations. And we also want to know that Russian military commits crimes. For example, there probably will be widely circulated footage from the north of Kyiv where a military tank just of, unprovoked, just because it can, runs over an elderly man driving a car. And this person now is in a critical condition in a hospital in Ukraine, in Kyiv. So, there's no need to do that. There's absolutely no threat. It's just because they can, because they want to terrorize. So, this is evil. It is taking over that part of Europe, and it's not going to stop there. There was a question if Poland is next. I don't think Poland is next, but it's definitely on the list. I think the Baltic countries are next.
Well, thank you. Thanks to both of you for this. I've kept you well over the hour that you've promised, and just a real delight to see you both again. I wish it weren't under these circumstances. We're going to continue working with KSE. They are partners with the Center for Governance and Markets here at the University of Pittsburgh. They've been working with the Center for Russian East European Studies, shout out to them, who also co-sponsored this event. We have a huge community here in Pittsburgh. We've learned a thing or two over the past several months about resettling scholars. I hope it doesn't come to that. But you know that we are all here for you, to work with you in any capacity that we can, online, remotely. You just let us know, and we are here to support the work, your students, anything that you might need. And I think there's a global community out here that wants to help as well. So just
Jen,
know, go ahead.
One last thing. There was a question, can we get a list of credible Ukrainian sources on social media? I'm going to post on my Twitter, it's @Mylovanov, later today, maybe tomorrow, the official accounts of the government sources that you guys can follow. Okay.
Fantastic. And watch out, Tymofiy is on TV all the time. We really valued your commentary and the time that you've taken for that. And we hope to see you both here in Pittsburgh one day soon. We wish you and your family safety and good health. And just know that we're here. And thank you so much for all of this. Thanks to our audience for such great questions. Thanks to everyone for tuning in.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
We try. Thank you.
Okay.